It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears.
Hello, and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is, as always, Isaac.
I'm still Alexis.
Excellent. And today we are discussing The Babylon Eye by Masha Dutoit, which I hope is how that is pronounced. Would you like to do the plot, or shall I?
Why don't you?
All right. So we are in a dystopian cyberpunk, dystopian-ish cyberpunk alternate future.
I'd say it's fairly dystopian.
Yeah, it's definitely on the dystopian side. Our hero starts the book out in prison, and she is offered a deal because she used to be a Gardag trainer and handler.
AKA K9 unit.
Cop.
Yeah. K9 unit cop, but with, cyber dogs.
Yes, Gardags are cybernetically enhanced dogs that used to be all, armored and scary, but these new ones are apparently able to pass as real dogs. And one of them has gotten loose, and their handler has disappeared in the Babylon Eye, which is, as we learn, a sort of a midpoint, trading city.
It's like an interdimensional transit hub
between Earth as we know it and the strange worlds. And so she has to go and get the dog back.
Or kill her.
Or kill the dog if unable to get the dog back. And it is that process which the book follows. Any additional notes there?
No, not really. I guess it's important that part of why she is both in jail and also is tapped for this mission is that she doesn't look like a normal cop because she still has the tattoos from when she was in an eco-terrorist gang.
Yes, indeed.
In her, foolish youth.
Correct. There are lesbians. Our hero is a lesbian in this book. Mm-hmm. And arguably there are wizards. They're like corporate overlord wizards for the most part, I would say.
Well, and the thing is that, there's also there's all this weird, strange technology which might as well be magic. So you could argue that all of the other aliens are a form of wizard, but they're not really the wizard figures.
It's a little bit of a stretch, this one, but that's fine. It's a fun book. We're gonna do it. It's let's head on into why you should read it. I have a number of reasons why you should read it. It has.
So one reason that you should read it, I think, is that it has a really interesting setting. And the author has a really good sense of how much to reveal. This is the rare book where I came away going, I want to read more books just to get a better sense of this world, but I also didn't feel like the world was underdeveloped. The author just does a great job of giving a sense that there's this much bigger, stranger universe out there, but filling in just enough that, just as much as you need and not giving you too much gratuitous info dumping.
Yeah, no, this is a great setting, I would say. It's the star of the book, but which is not to say that the rest is bad, but certainly a great deal of the love and attention is lavished on this sort of space station-ish environment, and it's pleasantly nostalgic for me. Because it is definitely a cyberpunk novel with jacks and modifications and such, which has been out of style for a long time. But also the setting felt like a sort of a CJ Cherry space station to me.
It does. It has that thing that Cherry does really well, and that actually Alien, the movie, did really well of, the space station, giving you the sense of this giant space station future, but still having it feel appropriately grungy.
Yes, everything is properly grimy here, which I really appreciate.
And claustrophobic.
Yes. Also, this book does a fantastic job of creating diversity. in a way that a lot of the books that we do don't, both among humans and among the various strange world races and sort of genetic castes. And there's a whole bunch of different like social organizations and structures that are colliding in this sort of trading world.
And and it feels very, the ways that that the characters navigate it feels very realistic, where people both absorb some of the where people often are absorbing the prejudices of whatever the upper caste of these other societies are, but also because they're outsiders, it's easier for them to overcome those prejudices because they're not as baked in. And I thought that was handled really well.
Agreed. As to why you shouldn't read this book, do you have any reasons?
Well, no, I think that if you want a setting that gives you a ton of context, this will leave you somewhat unfulfilled. Also, I would say that this is definitely out of step with the zeitgeist in that the main character is a cop, and she's a sympathetically, portrayed cop, and getting to go back to being a cop is presented as a good thing, pretty much throughout the book. I mean, it's complicated. It's not like rah police, but it has it is not anti-police, the institution of police, the way that some books are. And so, if that's something that's going to make you angry, then that's a good reason not to read this book.
True. Although the eye itself is a police state, and
yes.
The book does not shy away from the negatives there. And I imagine that a fair amount of the sequels will be involved in Elka sort of trying to figure out a way to thread the needle on that. Right.
One. No, I think it's well handled, but if you're the sort of person for whom that is just a political stance that you cannot, like, if you're the sort of person who couldn't watch any cop show, even like Brooklyn Nine-Nine or whatever, because you don't want anything about police, then.
Yep. But yeah, other than that, I can't really think of many reasons not to read this one. It's short. It's like it's real good. It doesn't hold your hand, as you said. So it does require a little bit of, thinking and interpretation. There's a lot of like weird terminology and alien languages thrown around without being explained, but you can pick it all up from context. You just have to do that,
Right. You do have to do that. I'll also say that the emotions in the book are downplayed. Not in a way, I didn't feel like it was a lack, but I felt like it was a real stylistic choice. And that's another thing that people may or may not like. It's a little bit flat in a way that feels like a style, not like an inability to realistically depict people's emotions. But
it's a little, it is a little hard-boiled in that sense.
Yes, it is. This is very much, it's not noir pastiche at all, but it's a bit of a hard-boiled detective book, and it, I think, succeeds really well at being that while also being a well-constructed piece of science fiction.
It really captures the sort of the feeling of living in a society where everybody is traumatized.
Yes.
Because everybody was brought up hard, because there is nothing but hard to be brought up in unless you're like the rich guy. Yes. This book also doesn't make the rich guy the villain, which, again, your mileage may vary on that one.
That's true. That's true. And you could argue that he's a wizard, and they're not in conflict.
They're kind of allied, in fact.
They're kind of allied. Well, the thing is that the one rich guy in this is not a villain. The corporations are, which is actually very, classic cyberpunk. I feel like this book does a good job of being very much a sort of classic police detective novel and also very cyberpunk, which are two different genres, and it melds them quite well, I think.
Yeah, no, more can be done with cyberpunk.
Yeah, more can be done with cyberpunk that isn't just like pastiche of 80s and 90s cyberpunk.
Agreed. I also, you mentioned that like most of the characters in this book don't aren't super emotionally expressive. And it's funny to me that the one autistic character is probably the most emotionally expressive character in the book.
He is, yes, no, he's great.
But anyway, so I think as far as content warnings go,
Yeah, as far as content warnings go, this is whether or not the dog dies is kind of a spoiler, but is also a content warning. So I don't know if we should just put that right after the spoiler zone break, or
sure. The dog is certainly imperiled and threatened. So
I guess we'll tell you right
that.
away, right after the spoiler zone break, whether or not the dog dies.
Indeed. Probably the rest of it is like, sort of the penal system in this world is harsh. There's like public, pillories and mutilation and beheading and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of dirt and grime and filth and dead bodies.
Yeah.
And poverty and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And, a sympathetic depiction of eco-terrorism, though it's not pro, I would say, but it is sympathetic.
Yes, it is. It's complicated. I would say that this book is not necessarily pro anything.
No, this book is very much just a depiction of, how complicated the compromises that we have to make to live in dystopian society are.
Yes, and this is, I think, our first book by a South African author, and although the author is dead, I did feel we're coming from a different kind of, we're not coming from a world where there are any good answers.
Yes, yes, indeed. Oh, I should also say, just one more thing that makes this book interesting is that this is the first one I've seen, presumably it's because the author is South African, but, I've seen a lot of worlds that have, that borrow the linguistic flavor of contemporary society. This is the first one I've seen where they use Dutch. They use a mixture, I think, of Dutch and Afrikaans, and that is interesting.
It is, yeah. No, I mean, it is also one of those things where it's like, are you bored with the usual sort of, America-derived sci-fi shit? This is not America-derived.
No.
Or England-derived or what have you, yeah.
Right, yeah, no, it's, so it is an interesting also bit of color that you don't often see.
Indeed. All right, off to spoilers now. Spoiler zone.
Off to spoiler zone. No, the dog does not die.
No, dog lives, and really that should be pretty obvious to you.
It should be pretty obvious to you, though. I mean, the thing is that because this book does a good job of evoking like those old, sort of Sue Grafton-esque cop mysteries. There is, there's just enough ambiguity that you could almost see, that you wonder, is the author actually going to do it? But no, the dog lives.
Yes, I mean, but the dog does not escape uninjured. The dog has a tough time.
Yes, the dog, Meja, which is apparently Dutch for girl. I looked this up in Google Translate.
I would be shocked if the J was pronounced like a J. It's probably Maya, I would think.
Probably,
yes.
I don't know. I Google Translate said it was pronounced Meja, but
well, never mind then.
I do not trust Google Translate to get Dutch right.
It's Misha, apparently. Yes, there's a lot of. I mean, I assume. I mean, there's a lot of like Mynheer, Mijnheer, and like I'd be shocked if that J was pronounced like a J, but maybe it's different after different vowels or in different situations. I don't know. Dutch is a silly made-up language. It's Meneer, apparently. It has been noted that it is a language which sounds like a silly parody both of English if you're an English speaker and of German if you're a German speaker.
It's true.
It gets you coming and going. But anyway, so where to begin? I love the setting. The setting is so.
Setting is so good. It really is. It's a little bit grimier than Cherry, actually, which is.
Yeah, I would say so.
But but in a good way. Like both of them are willing to show you a space station with all the like nuts and bolts and rusty panels and And I like that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It definitely doesn't shy away from like the the feeling of having people living in a space,
Right?
And poor people living in a space. More to the point,
right?
These are
the fact that like the employee quarters are a bunch of little cubbies that that have a sliding door. You're getting your like. It's great because it manages to feel very sort of cyberpunky while also clearly just being like a crappy hostel.
Yes, exactly. And like, I love the detail that when she comes in, like somebody has already squatted in the unit that she's been assigned to,
right?
And is definitely not going to move, so she has to go to this one that's all the way up in the corner, and the person who is squatting in her is like, I keep getting your fucking mail.
Right, is like mad at her for not getting her mail forwarded.
It's really good. Like,
it is. It's really good.
Just the human level interactions here, and sort of that's also like part of the moral of the story, such as there is, because it's like the reason that she's able to succeed in her task is that she. The currency of this world is like doing nice things for other people when you don't have to.
And we get the idea that Elk has always worked on social credit when her supervisor from her old job comes all the way out to the eye to get her ass out of the fire. My old bosses would not do this for me.
Right. Well, and it's very much, I really like the contrast, because you've got her like cafeteria buddies, the autistic guy and his friends, who are just sort of like, who, upon realizing that she's not going to be an asshole, welcome her sort of grumpily. And between that and, the love interest, who of course is secretly the corporate spy, not so secretly the corporate spy, and the bad guy. And, the love interest like takes her out to a fancy restaurant. And then, backstabs her. While the cafeteria people, who aren't particularly nice other than Otto, but like Diesel, who I kind of hope becomes a love interest.
I feel like that's being set up, yes.
Yes, great, good. I'm glad I'm, not the only person who got that vibe. And because I was kind of disappointed when she was, it was instead something was developing between her and Skylar, and I was like, well, maybe Skylar will turn out to be the bad guy.
I felt it was very clear very quickly that was what was going on.
Yes.
But yes.
My first inkling that the corporate spy would not be the final love interest came when a butch woman named Diesel showed up. What else do you need?
But, the way that, like, Skylar's friendly from the beginning, but in a very sort of shallow way of saying, complimenting her appearance and asking her out for coffee or whatever, as opposed to giving her, pragmatic advice.
Yeah, like Diesel acted appropriately for a person in this setting, which is like, you wait for the stranger to demonstrate that they're not an asshole before you, open up to them, because God knows who's coming in here, and if you end up trusting the wrong person, you could end up in a very bad situation. So, whereas it's like Skylar, as you say, is like bringing a cultural expectation of like sort of immediate friendliness, which doesn't actually jibe very well with what's going on here. And the other thing about Skylar. Mm-hmm. Is that she, speaking of hard-boiled, is a femme fatale.
She super is, yeah. And
it actually like works super well. Like I don't want to keep ragging on, even though I knew the end, but like that book was like oh, what if noir but with lesbians, and then didn't do anything with the femme fatale thing.
Yeah. The thing is, it had the devil who was the femme fatale, the demon who was the femme fatale, but there was never any real attraction there, so it wasn't a very effective use.
Was already happily partnered with her own, girlfriend, which made her a bad noir detective, as opposed to Elka, who is a good noir detective because she has lost everything and has a terrible past,
Yes.
And, it's not a dead wife, it's a dead dog, which I really appreciate, but...
Yes, I do like also that, this is very much the sort of the dead wife trope with, the new love interest, or the dead partner with, the new partner, but it's the dog,
Yeah, she has the names of her dead dogs tattooed on her, not like her ex-girlfriend.
And I have to say also, as somebody who recently lost a beloved pet, there's something extremely relatable about why is she in jail? Because she couldn't handle losing her dog and trashed a restaurant.
You should get Aurora tattooed on you.
I'm not kidding. Okay, I briefly considered it and then just realized that no, that was stupid.
Okay. Anyway, but the point being that I like the idea that the femme fatale for a lesbian is a woman who will actually ask you out and flirt with you openly.
Right, exactly.
That's the threshold.
The femme fatale is, somebody who's who is willing to take the first move, but she isn't coming on too strong.
Exactly.
That would be too
it's somebody who's being
suspicious.
normal at you, but also flirting with you. So that you don't have to be confused about what's happening.
Right. I really like also, speaking of this, even like a lot of the stuff about characters, I feel like is also about the setting. Like Elka's, the two things that Elka has from her stupid youth are a tattoo from being an eco-terrorist and also genetically modified horns. This is clearly a dumb youth thing but she just decided to own it.
It's like a terrible haircut from her childhood that is now permanently attached to her.
Or like a terrible tattoo. It's like another terrible tattoo, or like a weird piercing. It's like she got like super stretched out earlobes as a teenager, and then just decided she was going to stick with it even after she became a cop.
Right, exactly. But they are helpful. It does help her break free of the dude when he attacks her.
Yes, exactly. Useful, definitely useful Chekhov's horns.
Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed the way that, when the sort of wizard guy, they kind of, I don't know what his, it's sort of easy to figure out what like a Silicon Valley type, how that interacts with our culture, but how that interacts with this culture is a sort of a different thing.
Well, and particularly because he's not from Earth.
Right, exactly. God knows who he is and, his wealth means in this context, and also he's just indelibly part of the ruling class because this is a biological caste-based system.
Right.
But it's so funny that his kid,
his teenage son, who Elka rescues,
his teenage radical son, who is so into social justice that he turns himself black because that's an option available to him.
Yes, and the fact that he's so into Elka, or who he thinks Elka is, that he starts leaving eco-terrorist. The Rent is the eco-terrorist group. He starts leaving eco-terrorist graffiti, and Elka's like, "Oh no, has somebody noticed my past? Is this like part of a harassment campaign?" No, it's just the teenager who thinks you're super cool because you used to be part of a terrorist group, and he's a rich kid.
This is, I think, sort of, he's not a main character. He's definitely a side character.
He's very much a side character. He shows up
this is low-key one of the best, cringy rich teen, with his heart in the right place characters that I've ever come across.
He's great, and part of why he's great is because he's so cringy, but he's so earnest about it that you're like, I would hate you in person, but I love you as a character.
Right, exactly.
He's just really well depicted. And the rich guy also, the fact that this rich guy, because he's, hereditary royalty, like wealthy royalty, can be super benevolent and just step in and rescue Elka from, when what she needs, he doesn't rescue her when what she needs is physical help. He rescues her when what she needs is a rich guy who can, hire a lawyer for her.
Right. This sort of dovetails with the less fervently anti-cop thing, which is that it has the approach that we have actually encountered in a few of our books so far, which is when you're in this situation, when you're in a society that doesn't have any social mobility or even the pretense of social mobility, and you are stuck in the in the working area with your hand down a sewer pipe, trying to fish the rat out. Having a rich friend is a real good idea, right. And being on good terms with the cops is a really good idea, and and that kind of thing. So it's like, I think that's more the sort of the place where we're coming from here.
Yes, I have to say, and again, one of the things that I think this book excels at is all the little touches and side characters. The thing where she's trying to dispose of the dead rat that she's fished out of the pipes, which is clearly like the first, the hazing first job that her boss has given her.
Right.
And, some of the other aliens who don't even speak necessarily her language, but they're all just like shouting out the names of yummy dishes you could make with dead sewer rat, as this sort of impromptu joking thing. And it doesn't read like it's not a joke that we're necessarily supposed to laugh at, but it's this lighthearted moment where they're joking around with each other. And it does a great job of showing the ways in which Elka is going, of what makes Elka good at her job, which is that she can just sort of roll with things and not be an asshole.
Exactly. It felt like well observed, working guy banter, which I've certainly encountered in my life as a working guy.
And it's that thing that you do when you don't necessarily, when you share like 20 language words and they're mostly food, but you can, with a group of people, but whatever, you can still joke. You don't actually need much of a shared vocabulary to make jokes. You mostly just need some good facial expressions and an opportunity.
Exactly. A grin, a waggling eyebrow, and
and
the same joke 19 million times also.
Right, and like strategically deploying those 20 words that you have in common.
Right. But what I was going to say is so the reason that the Justice, he named himself Justice.
That's right, Justice, the teenage boy.
Turned himself black, because you can do that with the kind of gene technology they have here, is that he's a huge fan of the guy who founded the Babylon Eye, which is one of 3, I think, interface portal space station things between this Earth and the Strangers. And it seems like the figure who founded this one seems to be a kind of Haile Selassie / Che Guevara kind of a figure.
Sort of, except that it's clear that he was also he was a poacher who struck it rich.
Yes, but he's sort of...
But he's reinvented himself as this sort of equal parts Che Guevara, Steve Jobs.
Yeah, he's an interesting figure, particularly when you sort of hold him up next to the, openly corporatist other forces in this world, who are the Prussians, because I think World War II didn't happen in this world, and I think Germany won World War I. That's sort of the sense that we're getting here. That
would explain why there's so many, Dutch-derived words.
Yes. I think they refer to the Great War as if there was only one of them, and right. Prussia still exists, so that's my assumption.
No, I think you're right. And again, this is a good example of how at no point does it mention anything about that. It's just, you don't need info dumps sometimes to sketch a pretty good picture.
Indeed. And so there's them, and then there's the North Americans, who are, of course, the scummiest of them all, the Nexicans, or the company is called Nexico, and it's the American coalition is the other big power with their big thing, and the sort of the line that's drawn between the sort of weird kind of horrible kind of dirty kind of run as a police state kind of third worldy station that they're on, and the other ones which are just run as company stores.
Yes.
You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to Mexico.
Or it's at least in this one, the food is free. And because they have a sort of kind of socialist setup, in that it's like zero unemployment. You're assigned a job, and you are given food and a place to live when you go there.
Right.
So it has it's a sort of a socialist setup.
It is, including also the like
them.
massive communal public punishments.
It's not quite like struggle sessions, but you don't want to cross the cops in this environment.
But it's also very much the like, one of the things that corporate punishments of crimes tend to be fairly downplayed, right? Because you don't want to give people ideas,
right?
Versus the more socialist approach, the approach that we've seen, at least in multiple communist countries, is we're going to make a giant public example. It's either you get disappeared or we make a giant public example of you.
Right, and this is on the sort of this one is not to the we are disappearing people.
They don't strike
point.
me as being like willing to invest the kind of money that it would cost to have a police force where you can disappear people.
Exactly. This isn't the Stasi. They're much more ad hoc. And yeah, I think that's largely due to lack of funding as much as to anything else. It's one of those beautiful places where it's like this place continuing to exist is useful for enough people that it is allowed to continue to exist like this.
Right.
And even though the two corporations would love to take it over, their power is in balance because they're fighting with each other. And so it all sort of works out, kind of, sort of. It's not perfect, but it could be a lot worse, which is maybe what you can strive to achieve, I guess, in this world.
Yeah, I think looking for the least bad option is a running theme in this book. It
is definitely a recurring theme in this book, where it's like, and I mean that sort of goes into Elka's decision making. It's like, okay, I don't want to kill the dog. That's going to be bad no matter what. But maybe
it's going to be bad no matter what. But I'm going to do
bad,
absolutely everything to not kill the dog.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and the fact that she's sent in there to retrieve the dog and only kill her as a last resort, and then the guy that she's supposed to report to inside the Babylon Eye is like, what? No, just kill it. I just don't want to deal with this. Again.
Right. He refers to it as a device.
Right.
And has to be sort of bullied into referring to it as a dog.
Referring to her as a dog.
Referring to her as a dog, exactly.
So... yeah, it's also, speaking of side characters, I really enjoyed Alexander the Great.
Oh, Alexander the Great is so good. The Crab Man, and one of the big ways that Elka wins points with with Diesel and her crew is by upgrading the Crab Man's talk box so that he can type out his quotations from his hero Alexander the Great more quickly.
I think he has some of those just pre-saved.
Exactly. He's got macros in his talk box. Yeah, no, he was great. I think all of the side characters are great.
Yeah.
Otto is obviously great. Otto is like Otto is like obviously the kind of autistic person who's going to tell you about his special interests unless explicitly told not to.
Mm-hmm.
Or, will ask for permission because he knows he's not supposed to talk your ear off, but if you do give him permission, he will talk you mercilessly into the ground.
But this ends up actually working out for him by and large, because he's also the person who will see you staring at your your cubby that has been occupied by somebody else and go, "Oh yeah, that's not supposed to happen, but it does. Let me show you where there are other cubbies." Because the fact that he's out of sync with the basic keep to yourself social norms of the station, but he's also just a fundamentally decent guy, means that he actually makes friends really easily. Because
and even though he's out of sync with that, with the sort of mind your own business thing, everybody else accepts him because he's a good guy,
right.
And he's useful, and
right, and it's because this isn't the sort of norm that gets enforced, that gets brutally enforced. It's the sort of norm where people act like that from experience, but they can also generally tell, oh, this guy is just this
guy's
way.
harmless.
Right.
And we're not going to shun him because he's different, because, we're all different. This is a huge melting pot of different weirdos.
Right, exactly. You get the impression that really nobody comes to work in the Babylon Eye because they're normal for their society.
This space station is a small town, but the best version of one. Everybody knows old Fred is harmless, and we bring him our toasters to fix, even though he forgets to wear his pants sometimes in this little town.
Exactly. The fact that Otto works in cryptanalysis, like old school cryptanalysis, because they can't reliably send things electronically in the Babylon Eye. Another great detail. Electricity works only about half the time here.
It's basically whether or not, the space currents are flowing from Earth or from, the other universes.
Right, where the laws of physics are different enough that it disrupts the electrical systems.
And it's that was another thing I thought the author did a good job of, is the author remembered it consistently, and occasionally you would get to a point where you'd be like, okay, but which way, Elka, which way is and then Elka will go, oh crap, I just realized electricity's been on for a while. The recording device that they implanted me with must have been on for a while.
It's currently working. Yeah. But I was going to say that Otto being a cryptanalysis guy made me imagine a world in which Alan Turing was like Otto, and he's gay. And so that was a fun thing for me to imagine, like Alan Turing talking somebody's ear off about his special interests on his way to Bletchley Park on his bicycle,
Yes. And it's the fact that nobody seems to care at all about sexuality, and this is interesting. That is something where I do want to know where that came from, but maybe it's just that, honestly, maybe it's that World War II never happened.
Yeah, there was that post World War I boom in acceptance of alternate sexualities,
right, and then there's this
kind of got crammed back in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why. Maybe it's just stuff just kept getting more tolerant because there wasn't the drastic swing towards conservatism that, first the Nazis and then both the communists and the anti-communists did.
Yes.
So
and various other military dictatorships around the world, including the Japanese. Let's not let anybody off the hook.
That's true. Basically, first you have the fascist swing towards sexual conservatism, and then the two major, other two major social structures and the sort of post-World War II order, the communists and the anti-communists, both also take a strong swing towards different forms of social conservatism. And if World War II doesn't happen, then maybe you just don't get that.
This is true. Speaking of real-world analogs and of consequences of World War II not happening, we also have our space... they're not actually space Jews. I think they're space Roma, probably.
Yeah.
More, it matches up more on that way, but they are diasporic and exilic people who aren't even sure where they come from originally. And
it's that part that makes them not space Jews.
Exactly. No, space Jews have always had a very, but they are sort of hoarders of books and readers of books in addition. But they're trying to find where they came from through these books.
You can definitely read them as space Jews if you want. You can also read them as space Roma. You can also just read them as, I think, any relatively small and extremely oppressed outcast diasporic people is going to find something relatable about these guys.
Yeah, and also because this is a caste system, you can just read them as untouchables, in whatever caste system you want to bring that from.
Right.
But, yes.
And this is what I was saying before about one of the things I like about how the ways that, social prejudices are handled is the fact that, Elka is originally very much looks down on these guys because, she hasn't really ever encountered them, and all of the knowledge she has about these other universe societies is coming from the upper classes. So of course she's like, oh, those guys are weird and horrible and creepy. But because she didn't grow up with these prejudices, pretty much as soon as she gets to know them, she's like, oh, actually, you're just people.
Yeah, no, I mean, Elka is like obviously part of the the thing that makes Elka good at her job is that she is been through enough and been part of enough different kinds of communities that that she is absolutely willing to sort of give everybody a fair shake.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, including the woman who is
Yes, but no,
going to
but
betray
I think,
her. But
right, but I think it's not just that. I think it's a good, it's a good distinction between the kind of prejudices that you have because you grew up with them versus the kind of prejudices that you have because like the one TV show that you've seen from this other culture shows these guys as gross.
right, exactly.
Elka's ability to just connect with people and roll with things is definitely part of it. But it is also that she's coming from outside the society, so she doesn't, she can go, oh, yes, these are the caste things going on, but it doesn't have any emotional resonance for her in the same way. As opposed to Justice, who immediately goes and tries to hang out with these people because, what's he going to do? He's going to try to hang out with the absolute lowest caste people he can find. Because
he's going in search of realness, is Justice.
He super is.
Yeah. So I was expecting because the very first chapter of the book is from the dog's POV, and we do get a few like dog POV chapters throughout,
right?
But that sort of stops being a thing over the course of it. I was like, I'm not sure how the dog POV thing worked out apart, or like, it really did, serve to indicate that this dog is an intelligent creature,
Yeah.
but not like a human level intelligence, but certainly a living creature with feelings and thoughts.
A living creature with feelings and thoughts, and it does a good job. She feels like a very intelligent dog.
Yes, exactly.
A very intelligent, highly trained dog.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it didn't feel out of keeping with something like White Fang, where you can certainly write a book. You can certainly write a book from the perspective of even like an actual dog that doesn't feel weird.
Yeah. I thought they were fine. I didn't feel like they added a ton, except that again, it gives you, I suppose. I mean, I pick up the book and obviously it's oh no, it's a puppy. Like
yes.
The puppy is in danger. She's clearly a good girl, right? So like, but
it does help people who might not have that immediate response understand why Elka is fucking up for the sake of not killing this dog.
Right. So, and it gives you some insight into what Elka lost.
Yes, there is that as well.
And and
why losing her older guard dogs was enough to drive her to this point. And I also like, there's room for this in the sequels, but, I also like that we don't actually find out Elka's whole backstory in this book.
No, we find out basically just enough to understand why she was in jail at the beginning.
But we get little bits and little pieces, and we get that, she was largely in jail because she wanted to be done, and so she blew up her life because fuck it. Rather than because she did a really bad thing. Although she might have done a really bad thing with the rent, which continues to be referred to.
Yes, I mean the thing, it's hard. Is right. It's hard to tell because you get the impression that she doesn't. She looks back at her time with the rent with complicated feelings, right? She's not like, oh, I was completely wrong. I shouldn't have been an eco-terrorist. But she also doesn't long for the days of being an eco-terrorist. I think it feels like she's still sympathetic to the cause, but also, does not feel like that is going to, suit her current life. She doesn't like choose to leave. She gets arrested. They all get arrested. The rent.
Yes, indeed.
Or at least her little cell of the rent gets arrested in the process of trying to like bomb an oil rig or something. And so yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to get more of her backstory if we do in future books. But you get a surprising amount, actually.
Yeah, no, just the brushstrokes that we need to understand her, motivations and character.
Right.
Is very well done.
Yeah.
And like after previous disappointments, I'm not going to guarantee that we're going to do the sequels to this one, but I think that I think I'm going to read at least the first sequel to this one, and we may end up covering it if it's on par with this one, because I found this one really entertaining, and there was like a lot. There was a lot of good meaty stuff in the setting to get our hands on. So like this was another reader recommendation I really wanted to thank. Yes, Tumblr user Moonmilk has given us 2 very good recommendations so far.
Yes,
so,
shout out to
you,
Tumblr
Moonmilk.
user Moonmilk.
Hooray for moon milk. I hope you don't find this cringe.
As far as my little complaints go, really, it's only 2 things, and one of them isn't the author's fault, and the other one is just a pet peeve of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to ban wry smiles from fiction. I don't like them. But I understand that that's completely on me.
That's
and it only
completely
happened
on you,
twice.
because I have absolutely seen wry smiles in real life.
No, I'm not saying that they don't exist. I just it's an allergy. I understand that that's complete. It's just my own insanity there.
Yeah,
But,
that one's on you.
Yes, I understand.
Don't-
The other thing.
Absolutely don't.
Sorry, go ahead.
We should not ban phrases, and I know, having said this, like 2 episodes from now, I'm going to attempt to ban something and get called on it. But we should actually not ban any of these things, because when strategically deployed, they can be perfectly useful. And and the things that authors will try to do to avoid them end up being so much worse. Just imagine all the things. Just imagine what could replace
conundrum.
A wry smile that could be so much worse.
I mean, I don't know. I take a rueful grimace over a wry smile.
Yes, but that really says way more about your personality than it does about writing.
But I shared that knowing that it was an insane thing to think. But the other thing is not on me, but it's not on the author either, which is that this is a self-published book, which means different things now than it used to. Like back when publishing, was big and profitable enough to publish like whatever weird shit came over their desk if the acquiring editor was in a good mood that day. Self-publishing had a kind of it had a what's the word that I want? It felt like tainted.
Well, it's also that
it felt like,
it's also that you couldn't before print on demand existed and ebooks, self-publishing pretty much only existed as giant vanity projects, because you had to throw all that money into getting your stuff offset printed.
Right, exactly. You spent $1,500 to get your axe to grind that nobody else cared about out there, which generally said something bad about you. But it's far different these days. However, but there are some consequences to self-publishing, one of which is that you don't have a professional editor. I mean, you might not even have a professional editor if you're actually publishing these days, or if you're publishing through a company these days. But there are a number of like typos and like weird little bits and pieces in this book, in the ebook here. And some of them are like, because there's a lot of like dialogue and weird phrasing anyway, there are times where I'm like, is that dialect or is that just a typo?
Right.
Which is like, it's not unreadably bad. It's just, I wish that there had been the resources to have somebody look over this and to tighten some things up.
For all we know, it was copy edited, but one of the things that traditional publishing is good at is multiple pairs of eyes, and even then typos still make it through.
Of course. And also, like, if you look back at pulp SF paperbacks from the 70s and 80s, you'll find a lot of the same sort of stuff going on.
You will, yes, absolutely. Or, the fact that my 10th Lee book, which promises a foreword or afterward, I can't remember, by Marion Zimmer Bradley, and then they just forgot to put it in the book. Yes, self-publishing is a completely different landscape these days. Honestly, though, it makes me a little bit sad because this is absolutely the sort of book that would have been published by like a tiny lesbian press, 20 years ago. And a lot of those tiny lesbian presses just don't exist anymore. And that's just, it's sad.
Exactly.
Like,
this has sort of Lambda Wordwinner written all over it.
It's, I mean, it does. I agree. And so, I just, it does make me sad for the loss of, but I do, and I feel like as much as I enjoyed this book, it probably could have been tightened up a little bit. And
yeah, I suppose. I mean, it's pretty short, though.
It's pretty short. And honestly, these days, given the zeitgeist, if it had been traditionally published, the author might have been leaned on to pad it out a bunch with like a bunch more emoting. And so honestly, in this case, I think, perhaps it's for the best that it was self-published. I'd rather have the typos.
Yes, exactly. So I think, and like I've really enjoyed all of the self-published books that we've done, which have included The Nightbird's Feather and The Wicked and the Willing. They were both very good and very interesting in ways that they might not have been if they had gone through a traditional publishing process. Yeah,
it's true. Like I've read a lot of self-published stuff that is perfectly decent and entertaining, and it probably would have been published by a small commercial publisher or possibly even a large commercial publisher 30, 40 years ago. But then there's a fair amount of stuff where the fact that this is getting, the fact that these books are getting self-published says something really bad about the state of the publishing industry.
I agree.
Let's, and I may, I don't entirely know what's wrong with publishing, which is unfortunate because I work in it, but, but like, I think it's...
The other downside to modern self-publishing is that you don't get distributed by libraries who still rely on major publishers as gatekeepers, even though they probably shouldn't anymore.
Why could books like this not be? Why are they not getting picked up? They're all perfectly commercially viable, I feel like. And it's not that, and I don't say this because it's self-publishing is bad. I wish that these authors could spend less time having to work on, self-promotion and more time writing books. That's why traditional publishing is supposed to exist. Is so that, the authors can focus on writing and other people can handle copy editing and marketing and composition. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like we've been having versions of this conversation for the last 20 years. Why should a cartoonist have to be a t-shirt salesman in order to, actually make a living from this?
Right, but okay, there's several things going on there because like graphic novels I think do have somewhat different economics.
This is true.
For one thing, they take a lot longer to produce per, hour it takes the reader to consume. And it's not that, the comics industry isn't also incredibly screwed up, but this is the thing, there's just something has gone deeply wrong with the publishing industry that stuff that absolutely would have been viable 20, 30 years ago isn't anymore, at a time when producing books is cheaper than ever.
Yes. Well, I think.
Sorry to derail this.
I'm actually not going to embark on my crackpot theory about why that might be because we're already pretty off topic at this point.
Anyway,
I might jingle about it. But anyway,
I'll spare you my full dissertation on this topic. Short version is that a bunch of people realize they can make more money not doing things than doing things, and we're all living with the consequences of this.
money is fake.
Anyway, the moral of the story here is that if you were inclined to still be a snob about self-published books, this is,
Yeah, that it has long
these
since
three
changed.
episodes I feel like are really good. At this point, publishing is no longer serving as an effective gatekeeper. I mean, I'm sure it is also gatekeeping out a ton of crap, but this is self-published books are better than ever, and you should absolutely give them a fair shake.
Yes, and we are very grateful that we have an audience that knows where to find good ones.
Yes.
And not to downplay your and Leora's efforts in this as well, but all the help we can get.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I will stop ranting about this.
Okay. I will just do a couple of little notes that I have. Mm-hmm. I liked the sort of the detail of the omnipresent background music to demonstrate whether the electricity is working or not. Both was like,
this would actually make a really good movie. Like, this would make a really good science fiction movie. You could, and you could use the way that you could use the music, the fact that, whether or not they're always playing they're playing Muzak all the time.
Right.
And that's partly because, of course, they are. It's, it's like a shitty job, but also so that you can tell whether or not, the space currents are blowing from the east or the west. It's a great.
Yeah, you could do some dramatic, silences, and then but even more creepy, the music creeping back, and she doesn't realize it, kind of stuff.
Right, exactly. You could
and like play with diegetic versus, recorded music and stuff.
I would love to see this picked up as a movie or a Netflix series or whatever.
There are definitely some directors who could do a great job with this setting. Like, I think that the people who made God, what's that kaiju movie that I don't
Pacific
like?
Rim?
Pacific Rim, yeah. The people who made Pacific Rim could do real good with this setting. I'll insert a jingle to defending myself from the people who are going to be mad that I don't like Pacific Rim. Anyway,
I was also disappointed
the reason
in Pacific Rim.
But the reason that it came to my head was like that specifically reminded me of walking around in China, and I don't know if that's actually true or just a sampling error, but sort of being followed by music wherever.
No, I feel like it is a thing that you get anywhere where you have a lot where you've got a lot of like little sketchy either open air markets or enclosed markets, but where everything isn't big shopping mall necessarily. Though of course shopping malls also have Muzak, so it's just
it was more ad hoc, I guess.
Right, it's just more ad hoc, but also it's something that we don't necessarily have a lot of here because everybody has their own personal space bubbles.
Yes, that is absolutely a good thing to point out.
In places where most of society is forced to, by reasons of space, cram together and coexist, you get a lot more shared noise. And this book did a good job of evoking that in general.
Agreed. And I guess the other thing is that I was I think I was expecting more conversation about the eugenics and the sort of the caste system but I think that maybe we're keeping that in our pocket for later. It's just sort of such an accepted part of this world that we're not even beginning to grapple with the moral element of it.
Right,
it
and
just is what
Elka
it is.
is not honestly that self-reflective.
Right, exactly.
But again, this did a good job of it was the narrative makes it very clear that this is not a good thing.
Right, exactly.
Justice by himself makes it clear that this eugenic stuff is not actually selecting for super intelligent people.
Right. But and there's also the fact that by the rules of this world, no human of this earth actually knows where this comes from or why any of this is, because they're not allowed in the stranger worlds.
Right.
So, you just be like, well, I guess that's what's going on over there, and I don't even understand that there's like multiple stranger worlds with multiple different like subspecies of humanoids on them. So we may find out more later.
And I really think, and even honestly, even cyberpunk tends to forget to do this, but I think the class of people who aren't grandly tragically oppressed and aren't, but are just sort of stuck working shit jobs is a sadly underrepresented group in science fiction and fantasy, because we really want to be about heroes. So either you have to be from, the class of people who gets to be heroes, or you have to be somebody whose entire journey is about showing that your class of people actually should also be allowed to be heroes. And nobody's going to be a hero in this, except maybe the dogs.
Yes, no, I do. I mean, this is why I love fiction that has a more sort of socialist bent about it, because there's always that thing that I hate where it's like, oh God, why shouldn't we also be allowed to be an overclass? Let my people get in there and start abusing and displacing people.
Right, and there's also just this inherent idea that, in so many of these books, there's the inherent idea that there's sort of the thing that makes you a protagonist. And whatever that is, it, can depend. But there's always a sort of a sense of what is and isn't. Who can and can't be a protagonist.
Sort of the tragedy becomes that a protagonist has been born to the underclass.
Right.
As opposed to there being an underclass.
Right, or just the tragedy is that, our prejudice makes us overlook the fact that there is that, anybody could be a protagonist so long as they do have that special magic. And nobody here has any special magic. Everyone's just doing their best in a grungy environment.
Yeah. I mean, that, and like, I think you said, maybe the dogs are allowed to be heroes, but it's like you're set up to think that the dog is going to, be some sort of super weapon.
And she's just a dog. She's just a police German Shepherd.
The only thing that she does that is remarkable for her modifications is climb ladders. That's it.
That's true. Yes.
She can't even take out the two people who come to steal her.
Right.
So it's like everything here is very we're all just people making our way.
She can also she can read sign language. That's the other thing. She has a slightly more advanced,
which well-trained real-world dogs can also do.
Yes. But yeah, no, again, it's just, I feel like I would like to see more of this sort of thing in fiction. What actually it reminds me a little bit of? This one is not telling a grand social narrative, but this feels a little bit like reading The Dispossessed, the setting.
High praise.
Right.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And, again, it's not, it doesn't feel like it's trying to make a point in the way that The Dispossessed is, but it has that same sort of extremely realistic view of what even a relatively, sympathetic quasi-socialist society could look like.
Indeed. I will, since we're getting over time here, I will wrap up, unless you have any other...
Nope.
No, cool. I will just say that the thing that they go through to get through the Babylon Eye is called the Ishtar Gate. And when I was first reading it, I was like, oh, yes, of course, I'm familiar with the Ishtar Gate. And I realized that I was not, in fact, thinking about the Babylonian architectural marvel. I was thinking about the falafel restaurant up the street from my house, which is called Ishtar Gate. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to remember that that's where I knew that from.
Excellent.
Anyway.
That's a great note to wrap up on.
Yeah.
So I think next week we're doing Mortal Follies.
Yes, next week we are doing Mortal Follies, unless we rearrange this so that all of the super English or Anglophilic stuff is in one place. But maybe we ought to break that up since there's a lot of them now. But we'll find out. Mortal Follies is the next one we're recording, certainly.
Yes.
So until then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.